I'm holding in my hands my final manuscript for my contribution to the Immigrant Writers Association anthology, Reborn With Memories, that is slated to come out this month in October. So this is anthology number 5 for the Immigrant Writers Association set of anthologies, and this would be my second year contributing to the anthology. So this one I'm super excited about. I'm very excited about how the two anthologies that I've contributed to are going to come together in terms of my own story and my own writings. So my chapter in Reborn With Memories, which is the new anthology coming out, is called The Odds of Iron. And my previous title of my chapter in the 4th anthology, which was called Finding the Way, which many of you supported me in and have read through, that one was called From Where I Once Stood. And so a lot of people will ask the contributing writers some of the reasons why they wrote what they wrote, or the ideas that they had, and how both stories tie into each other. And at first, it wasn't really intentional that my stories tied in. For one, when I was writing in Finding the Way, I had no idea that I was going to be contributing a second year, so I didn't have any plan to do so. And then when I decided that I was going to, and I wrote The Odds of Iron for this new book, and I went back and reread what I had written for Finding the Way, paired up with this, it just all kind of seemed to follow a storyline, although it wasn't intentional. So in Finding the Way, I used a lot of elements of homesickness, of trying to find my own sense of self, my own sense of identity, really struggling to build an identity here in Canada, and coming from somewhere so close like the US, dealing with some of those stereotypes and a lot of people's perception that the two countries aren't that different, so how could you possibly go through these difficulties that other immigrants and refugees experience. And so I kind of used that as an outlet to paint the picture for people that, yes, we're all coming from different experiences. We have all come to Canada for our own reasons. Some people didn't have a choice. I had a choice. However, the reasons why I came, if you really delve deep and look into why, and you really know my full story, I think that just knowing the experiences that I had after immigrating and during, and the amount of money that went into that, the amount of time, and the types of discriminations that I experienced even after coming to Canada, ironically enough, for being the reason why I came here in the first place, I think really just paints the picture that you really don't know somebody's story until you get to know them. And even then, unless you've walked it, you can't fully appreciate it. So we've all come from different experiences and different backgrounds, and but we put all that together to kind of create a story that all goes together with all of the different writers. So that part of my life in the last anthology from last year, I think that really focused on my first maybe 5 or 6 years in Canada. I can go back and read my poems now that I wrote for that anthology, some of which actually poems that I already had written prior to writing for the anthology. So I would say that some of the poems I actually wrote as early as maybe 2015, 2016. So only a few years into having lived in Canada. I think it's really representative of those first few years of trying to settle, trying to really discover, where do I fit? Where do I belong? Do I even have a concept of family here? And what does that look like? Because I did come to Canada for my partner, and I did come to Canada alone, essentially, without my family. So it really paints that, that portrait of what that experience was like. And reading through some of the poems now, although I can definitely remember what all those feelings felt. I was happy to go back and read them even last year, and some of them didn't really sit with me as heavily anymore. Like, the emotions aren't as intense as they used to be. So that kind of showed some of the areas that I've grown and that I've maybe worked through a little bit. And then as I was writing The Odds of Iron, so a lot of these poems here for this new anthology, which is titled Reborn With Memories, that one, I wrote a lot of these with the intention of submitting to this anthology. So, it was very intentional. There are a couple in here, I believe, that I had written prior to, but still in the back of my mind, knowing this might be something that I submit. So as I read this chapter, and as I was writing it even, I was noticing just the amount of personal growth and the strength, even the resilience that came from some of the things I was writing about in my first chapter, From Where I Once Stood. This particular chapter in this particular anthology is all about discovery of self, rebuilding your entire life, and the strength that takes, and truly is about strength. So when I titled it, when I was thinking of titles, what popped up just out of nowhere for me was The Odds of Iron. And most people know iron often represents strength, perseverance, resilience, and the odds of overcoming things that maybe are meant to take you down, and you aren't going to let them. And so this chapter kind of explores, okay, I had a really difficult time in this stage of my life. I've, worked through a lot of anger and disillusionment and frustration and sadness and grief. And what do I do with all that? So that's what this chapter is. What am I going to do with all of that? Because if you sit with it too long, which I did in my own experience, I sat with that grief for years, that feeling of loss and just those feelings of injustice. I think I sat with much too long, that it ultimately started to take me over as a person. And so I've really had to kind of get out of the grips of that, and that's a struggle even still today. But as I'm reading my writing now in the present moment for this new chapter, I am seeing that there's so much growth. And as you read, if you read them in order from the previous anthology to this one, you'll really see that pattern. It's almost like the hero's journey. That's kind of the unintentional vibe that I got when I was reading both of them together. It just follows, that overall sense of trying to find where you fit and where you belong, and going through some pretty rough times, and really almost to the point of wanting to give up, and then realizing, hey, I have to be responsible for my own life. I have to be in control of me, and that's all I have control over. And how am I going to deal with these things? And so it's just, what can we pull the strength from within ourselves? So everybody's got something personal that really motivates you, that pushes you to keep going in times of difficulties and times of grief. Like, some of us will be just sobbing on the floor, and like we don't even know how to pick ourselves up, right, from certain situations in our life. And it's what is it that's going to bring us back up? What is it that's going to motivate us? And so for me, I think it truly was that sense of belonging, making friends here in Canada and being able to rebuild that sense of belonging and community and friendship that I had back home here where I'm actually living, but also keeping those same ties back home so I'm not losing those incredible friendships either. And making them coexist, I think was really helpful in my experience. Reaching out for help was super important for me, and really just acknowledging some of the difficult emotions that I was having. I know it sounds cliche, but honestly, that was a huge wake-up call for me, in terms of, I can't do this all alone. And for a long time I thought I could. And so I think, as newcomers often do, they think, oh, I'll deal with this on my own and I'll just get through it. And sometimes you can, but there are certain situations too where obviously you're not always able to. So yeah, I think really what I wanted to drive in this particular chapter was just strength and, being able to overcome and be resilient, and truly to find what it is that drives and motivates you to keep pushing forward. My loved ones, my wife, my friends, my family have been super, super supportive in my journey and have been a big reason for me to keep going. My writing has really helped me to keep going, and just the overall sense of just wanting to be better, be a better version of me and try to learn from things. I think without a concept of learning, going through something that's really, really hard to go through, without that sense of a lesson, I would really struggle. I need to have two things to be able to overcome something. So I need to have hope, can never lose hope, and also the sense that I learned something from a situation. So learning lessons and being able to take those lessons and apply them to similar situations in the future. So I hope that you enjoy this next anthology, and that you can kind of see what I see in the story. But I'm sure it'll read different for everybody. Everybody has their own experience, so you might catch things that maybe hit for you that maybe I didn't catch on to, or that maybe I didn't intend for. But that's what poetry is, right? We all have our own interpretations, and we take what we can from our own experiences, and we make meaning out of it. So yeah, I hope you enjoy.